Hey, what's going on, YouTube? Thank you for clicking on this video. Go ahead and give your boy a like if you would. Today is a good day. I have an amazing guest with me that's going to be joining me in a little bit. But my name is Dorin. This is The Weird Perspective. And on this channel, I look to inspire, motivate, encourage, and challenge you to go after God, to learn about Jesus and what his Bible says. I want to inspire you to seek out the truths of Jesus. I want to motivate you to go deep and deeper in the study of the Bible. I want to encourage you and let you know that Jesus loves you, that he died for you. And I want to challenge you to recognize sin and repent. And so this is the off-season edition of the podcast. The original podcast, season 2, is coming up in a couple of weeks, so be on the lookout for that. I do have a new co-host, made that announcement about a week ago. But today, as I said earlier, I have a special guest. You guys know I like to interview people that I know and that I'm close to, and that people that just bless my life. Like, being around them is just a blessing. Now, today's guest is someone that I have a ton of respect for. This man he's a community leader, man that serves his community. He just doesn't come up with ideas and gives orders and have other people do them. He out there actually serving himself, right? This brother is living out James chapter 2, verses 14 and 17. And so, welcome to the channel, pastor of Mount Olivet Baptist Church, Pastor Mac. Welcome to the channel, brother. I'm sorry about messing up your last name.
Oh, that's all right. Good day, brothers, to you and all those that are with us on tonight. As you said, my name is Dorin McIntyre, but the community affectionately calls me Pastor Mac. If you say Dorin McIntyre, they may say, who? Pastor Mac, they got me.
Yeah. I've that's all I know you as, is Pastor Mac. So I was just looking through our emails, and I was like, man, how do I say his name? I don't want to pronounce it wrong. And I'm terrible at knowing. Everybody that knows me know I'm just real bad.
My name's been messed up all my life.
But your first name is great. My son his name is Dorin. My oldest boy, his name is Dorin. So that is
spell it the same?
That's a good name. No, he spells it Dorin.
Yeah, that's how I spell my daughter's name. I hope that.
Okay. All right, man. So, real quick, just want to give you the floor to kind of like introduce yourself, let people know. We talked about who you are, your name. Obviously, you're a pastor. Let the world know a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, man. Thank you. First of all, let me just say thank you for having a platform where believers can come together and talk about urban issues, challenges, yes, and the beauty of the community. So, of course, I'm Dorin McIntyre, pastor of Mount Olivet Missionary Baptist Church on the west side of Chicago, in the Austin community, affectionately known as Pastor Mac in the community. Also the executive director of What About Us Charitable Enterprises. Interestingly enough, I'm kind of private about my family dynamics because of some of the things that we do, but I am married, 3 children, 5 grandchildren, 0.5. We got one coming.
Congratulations.
Empty nesters, man. We've been living in our home, just my wife and I, for many years now. So we enjoy it. I laugh and say, God been good to my face. I'm an older man now, but God has been good to my face. I'm just, man, what you see is what you get, brother. I worked in corporate America as director of sales for many years. I left corporate America in 2016 to really work in community where my heart was. I've been in community 25 years, just serving. But I just love community, and I walked away and left 6-figure salary on the table.
Wow.
To come out here and do this. And somebody said, you don't have a plan. Where Christ said you don't have a purse or script. And that meant to me, you don't have to worry about no money or what you gonna say.
About none.
Just go. So that's who I am, man. And honestly, what you see is what you get. And hopefully more people know me. One thing I will say is I choose to love people. And because I love them, I get to know them. I don't wait to get to know them to love them. Because if you got to know me before you love me, you might not like me. Right. So, and not that I think something wrong with me, of course, but everyone has something. So
Yeah.
I just really focus myself on loving people. And that's just who I am, brother.
Yeah. And I mean, first time I seen you, like, man, I lived in Austin for a little bit. And I was like, man, this, when I started working with the organization that I work with, and we was going to the events, and I was like, I kept hearing your name, and then, I was like, man, I see him out here actually doing it. Like I said in the intro, is you're not just like coming up with ideas and then barking orders at people like, all right, I'll go do it now. Like, you actually out there in the community yourself, like setting up tents and getting engaged and you're out there. And I was just like, man, this is a blessing. It was refreshing to see a pastor, right, do that, because you don't see that too often. But before we dive into everything else that we're going to talk about, I wanted to ask you a question. What's your favorite part about being a pastor?
I'm gonna give you two things, right? The first thing is just serving God's people. I just really try to do how Christ did. He went everywhere, anywhere, talked to everybody, sat with what people may say is the worst of the worst and the best of the best.
Yeah.
And that's just emulating my life after Christ. And that's what I love doing and why I say that's my favorite part. But the other part is all the weird stuff. when I asked the guy, can I pray with him? He said, no, man, I'm an athlete. I said, okay. It's just having those instances like that. It just, it keeps my, I have sometimes a dark, humor in me that I don't let out, but it keeps feeding that part of me, being able to engage with people and just be right there where they are. Whether they accept me or not is not something I take personal, but man, just dealing with some crazy stuff sometimes really lights my fire to say there's more reason I need to be out here.
Most definitely. If you would share a fun fact about yourself.
So I have been swimming my entire life. My mother put me in water as an infant. You see that stuff on TV, right? Where they got infants swimming. My mother literally did that to me.
Wow.
So I will swim in anything. A pond, a lake, muddy water, clear water, it does not matter, man. I will get in that water. I love being in the water. So, man, I've just been someone who loves water, been swimming longer than I can remember. I actually took a course in college, 2 years of swimming just so I can learn how to do it even better. So I don't know what I got out of that, but I learned some stuff. I could be a lifeguard, but I just love water, man. I've been in water since before I even knew.
Yeah, that's pretty cool because unfortunately, like, I can't swim. And so as a father, I feel just a conviction, like my kids gonna learn how to swim. So we was actually gonna take some swimming lessons, and then the pandemic hit, and then everything kind of went crazy. And so everything is getting kind of back to normal. So this summer, we definitely is gonna be taking some swimming lessons. Yeah. My responsibility as a father is to make sure my kids know how to swim. We want to really enjoy these vacations that we plan on going on. We need to know how to swim because there's going to be some water involved. So I'm going to make sure my kids know how to swim. So, I'm going to be doing that. And then myself too, I'm going to learn how to swim.
Well, I was going to say that when you stop. Like, you need to learn too.
Yeah. I'm going to learn too, because if they get out there and something happen, I want to be able to dive in there and go get it. I was watching this interview, and Jay-Z had said that, like, he was 30 something years old and he started having kids, and he was like, man, what if something happened with my kids? I want to be able to dive in there and swim, not go run to the lifeguard and can you get them? Like, I want to be able to just dive in there and get them. So I want to take on that and learn. So so you touched on a little bit, but are you originally from Chicago?
I am. I grew up, born and raised in Auburn, Gresham.
Okay.
I spent a lot of time in Inglewood. I spent a lot of time during some of my challenging years in Auburn, Gresham, and Inglewood. What I mean by that, just being in the street on the other side of the table.
Yeah.
experiencing life from that perspective. I grew up in a beautiful home. I just had a taste for the streets. I was like, man, my palate wanted to eat from that situation. I grew up in a great family structure where, mother, father there, grandmother, grandfather, uncles, had people around me, supported us. Everyone was, just there, seeing people taking care of their grass and, just taking care of their community and loving on each other and knowing the lady across the street, best security systems in the world then was Miss So-and-so peeking out her window,
Yeah.
playing in alleys and stuff. So, I just really, grew up in a great time, but at the same time, I challenged myself by putting myself in some awkward places.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's South Side. My mom's side of the family is actually, they're all from the South Side. So Inglewood, 63rd and Halstead, Green Street is where pretty much like our family building was. My grandfather owned a 2-flat that he left to my grandmother once they split.
Mm.
And that's where kind of the whole family used to meet. And then on the other side of the city, Austin is where my dad lived. My dad was from the West Side. So I got both sides. And then me, my mom, I grew up in Logan Square and got exposed to the North Side. So I'm kind of a little mix of everything all at one. So did you get what high school did you go to?
So I went to Calumet High School, which is on
Okay.
83rd and May, which is no longer. I think it's a shelter or something now. But living on the South Side. So you say Green Street, 630 Halston was all the areas that I frequented very much. I ended up going or coming to the West Side, and God did the only thing He knew could get me to the West Side, because I used to say, "It's too many people on the West Side. I don't know where all these people go." Right? It's 30 people on the corner. Where do all these people live? Right? But God knew the only way He was going to get me to the West Side was a woman. And about 25 years ago, I was doing a community meeting on the West Side, just so happened to be, and I saw my wife in this meeting, and I got to asking everyone, "Who is that?" My wife is born and raised in Austin. Right? I mean, she in the middle of Austin, right? And everyone's like, "Oh, all of us tried to get her. You're not gonna get her." I said, "Okay, you'll see." And man, she did the right thing. She made me wait because I would have messed it up. Right. But I met her 25 years ago, man. We got married soon after that and been together ever since, and that's how I really got to Austin, because I met her and started chasing up behind her and ended up doing the same type of work community-wise in the Austin community, and been in Austin 25 years approximately now doing this type of work.
Congratulations on 25 years of marriage. I don't hear enough people. I'm not going to say we don't, but I don't hear enough people honoring and celebrating marriages, especially as believers. Like, this is something that God tells us to hold up and to honor. And man, 25 years ain't nothing to just be like, "Oh, okay, that's cool." Like, that's something to give a round of applause for.
Yeah.
That's something that we should be, man, we should want to shout, give a shout dance when we hear about somebody being married for 25 years, because marriages ain't lasting long no more.
Oh, man.
And people getting divorced over politics and like, it's crazy. So, man, congratulations on continuing to stay committed and to just have an amazing witness and testimony of what a Christ-centered marriage will look like. And so congratulations to you.
Thank you.
Did you get the opportunity to go to college? What was that like?
I did. I actually attended Alabama State University.
Uh-oh.
I went to HSBCU, right? Historic, however you say all those letters. Somebody will look at this later and say, "Oh, don't say that," whatever. But I went to Alabama State in Montgomery, of course, Alabama, and great experience for me, man. I really loved it. I tried to become an Omega Psi Phi, right? They got kicked off the campus the year I tried to pledge, and they went underground. I was like, "Well, I ain't going underground with y'all because I don't know if y'all gonna be legit. I may not come back up legit." So I leaned away from it and just experienced the whole college thing and just, went that way. And I was an athlete, of course, played football, I played a season. I went to college hurt. My body was banged up from high school because I played senior. I played varsity from my freshman year. I only played three games, varsity football. And I was on varsity the next 4 years, basically.
Wow, what position?
So I played linebacker and guard.
Okay.
So playing both ways, special teams, kind of, in the area, in the hood, if I could put it that way, and not always the best medical attention. I wasn't being taught how to take care of my body, and I didn't seek it out myself. So, I banged up this body pretty good. So by the time I got to college, my knee was blown out. So I just went the other way. But college was great, man. I'm telling you, it's probably the best thing. I actually graduated from high school when I was 16.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I skipped some grades, and I was 16 years old, 800 miles away from home. And I knew I needed to get away from Chicago because Chicago was toxic for me, and I was toxic for it. So I said, okay, I picked the school I was going to go to about how far I was away. There was no logic to it. And Alabama State was the furthest one away that I got accepted to. And I jumped on a Greyhound bus with a footlocker and went all the way. And
how was that as far as like the racial tension or racial dynamic to coming from Chicago, going to Alabama?
Yeah, I experienced some racism a few times. My first few hours in Montgomery, I asked the cab driver for directions, and he looked at me and told me 25 cents for information. Now I'm in the cab.
Wow.
So it was like, I'm like, is he serious?
You get paid anyway. You can't give me directions.
What?
That's
Do you want a quarter? I didn't know what was going on. So I was like, okay, maybe I need to chill. Let him take me where he's gonna take me and get out of this cab, right? Because I'm a city boy, I get it. But also I saw a lot of love, man. A lot of, I got a good taste of what I grew up experiencing, people loving on each other and supporting each other. But I also saw that city, what they call a lot of Southern people, they would say our city slick. I saw that too, where you didn't, people would think people in the South are slow. They got this whole thing about the Southerners, and I'm like, nah, these guys just as dynamic as we are. So I fit right in some of the nonsense because I clicked with that crowd immediately.
It's a hood in every city. It's a hood in every city.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But overall, man, it was a great experience. And I ended up coming back and going to Chicago State and finishing up there, and just started just living my life in a different way, the negative way. I came back to the city and got caught back up, doing the same old stuff until I got to a place where there had to be a change.
Did you graduate?
I did. Yeah, I did.
What did you study?
Business administration.
Okay.
I had this mindset that I always one day wanted my own business. I wanted to be an accountant, but I ain't have enough in me at that time to be trying to stay in school that long. I was trying to get out of there.
Yeah.
In my mind, anyway. I said I want to run my own business and count my own money. That's how I wanted. That was always my mentality, right? and I think I accomplished both of them, but I didn't stay in school long enough to walk away with those upper educational degrees to do it. But I thank God for the time.
Cool. So went to college at the age of 16, went to play football, eventually came back to Chicago. You say you went to Chicago State?
Yep, Chicago State.
Chicago State, graduated with a business degree. And then tell us a little bit about your upbringing as far as church. Was your family into church? Did you go to church? What was that like?
Man, great experience. I've been around the church my entire life. I hung out with the pastor when I was young. I was an usher in the church, a deacon in the church, taught Sunday schools and Bible class. So that's going all the way up to my adulthood. But my early experience with the church is a little storefront, small space with enough to fit maybe 10 people and being able to reach above my head to unlock the gate to get in the church because I hung out with the pastor all the time. So I remember an experience when I wanted to get baptized. And my grandmother told me I had to get the definition of love. So I went to the Webster Dictionary and it came back. She's like, nope, that's not it. She pushed me back about 5 times because at that time, being around the church all my life and my family was around the church, always had a Christ example in my life, always. And man, I'm telling you, she pushed me back so many times about love. I went to the pastor finally and I called a meeting with the pastor. I had to be about 9 years old. So I've been messed up a long time, Derek. I've been messed up a long time. I went to the pastor and called a meeting and asked him the question about what is love. After, man, about 30 minutes, that seemed like 4 hours, right? When you were a kid, I went back home and I explained to my grandmother what I thought love was from that. And she said I can get baptized. The only reason I want to get baptized, all other kids are doing.
Right.
But she made me understand what love was. And I think that really helped me to understand and how I got back to the church after that, hiatus or sabbatical, whatever you want to call it, that time. Well, sabbatical means you're taking time away to get deeper in the Lord. Right. I took the time away from the Lord, probably the worst thing I could ever done, but it was also a good thing because I learned a lot that serves me today.
Sometimes we have to go through the wilderness, just like the children of Israel did. And we gotta continue to learn. Sometimes, I've had people in my life where sometimes you give them the word, you tell them, you lead them down the right road. Hey, take this way, go that way, do this. And they don't want to do it. Sometimes you just got to be like, all right, I'm gonna let that person go. My mom did it with me. I grew up in the church. All my life, my mom, she made me learn scripture, right? Made us memorize them. So just as much as we had to do our homework, we had to learn scripture. And she didn't play. And we was in church, first service, second service. My mom was heavily involved in the church. So she was part of the choir. She was on the usher board. So I was at church at least 4 times a week. And don't let them have a Friday night revival. You just feel like I'm there every day. All day. But don't fall asleep. You get that church pinch on the side, like stay up.
Man, I was an usher, so I had to stand there to the pastor finish this sermon. With my arm behind my back. On point, ready. You couldn't tell me nothing, man, with my little suit, my usher pin.
Oh man. So I grew up in them environments, and then when I was about 15, 16, my mom, she got remarried and she kind of like took the handcuffs off. And when she did that, like I was exposed to a whole lot of things that I thought was cool and hip, and I could do this now. Like I could listen to secular music now. Like, okay, I was hearing secular music anyway when I was with my dad. But now I get to like listen to it in my headphones at the house, and it just opened up a whole new world for me. And I went full all. I didn't do any like crazy things. I wasn't out like murdering people, but I definitely indulged in the ways of the world for a certain amount of time. And it was I was 19. I was like fresh out of high school. I had just got done with college. I was about to have my first kid, and my mom was moving away to Ohio. And then I was like, man, I wasn't doing anything here. I was working like a little job, doing nothing at Target. And I was like, man, my lease was about to be up on my place. And I was like, I ain't gonna renew it. I'm gonna just go to Ohio and just to get away. And that's what I did. And I was there for a year and a half. And while I was there, I was doing okay. But then I lost my job. And I couldn't find a job to save my life. Like you would have thought I had felonies. Like I couldn't get a job at a gas station, a restaurant, nothing. And I was like, man, what's going on? So I applied to a job here in Chicago. And I was like, man, if they give me this job, we're going to have to move back to Chicago. And I came here for a weekend. And that weekend, my best friend, still my best friend to this day, we've been friends for almost 20 years. He was going to church. He was active in church and going to church. Had been inviting me and ministering to me. We met when we was freshmen in high school. And, we young adults now. And I was going to stay at his house to go to this interview. And he was like, well, I'm going to go to church. I'm part of this play. You should come. And I was like, cool, I go to church. I wasn't opposed to going to church. I hadn't like denounced my faith, but by my actions, you could tell I wasn't a Christian. I was in
Right.
that area. And I went to church, and he was part of this play. It was called Eternity. And during this play, Pastor Mac, I kid you not, everything that I had been doing, the people who was playing these characters in this play, they were doing, but they were dying and they were going to hell. So literally they were dying in their sin. And
Yeah.
it rocked me so hard because I had knew all these like biblical truths, but I was pushing them to the side, just doing my own thing. And I seen that play. And at that play is when I dedicated my life to the Lord. And that was in 2011. And I've been walking with Jesus ever since. But it's been a journey. Came back to Ohio, told my wife, like, look, we moving back. I got the job, but look, we ain't doing this, we ain't doing that. She was like, what? Like, what you talking about? And it was Lord really was like, this is really about being a disciple. Here you go. And it was I've been walking with him ever since then. But yeah, that was my coming to Jesus moment. And that was when it was real for me. But I want you to share yours. You grew up in the church, you had your time where you was away from the church. When did you come back and fully give it all to the Lord?
Yeah. So when I got back from college, I left when my grandmother passed. My grandmother was like my rock, right? I was a grandmother's boy all day long, right? Learn how to cook, clean. Anything you can think of to learn to, how to take care of yourself. I got it from her. Even though I had all these men in my house too, my family.
Yeah.
So again, I went to college at a young age, came back at a young age. But when I was at Chicago State, I got back in the streets and I got locked up. And I remember looking at the judge, and the judge, when you getting ready to go see the judge, the public defender, whoever, the lawyer, they always ask all these questions, try to make you look better in front of the judge to, get rid of, some of the pain that the judge finna cause you, right? And when I got in front of the judge and they was like, yeah, he got a degree, he got this, man. He said, well, you the smartest dummy I ever met. And he faced me with 35 years right there.
Whoa.
So I went back to my lawyer. I mean, they had me. It was, drugs and all this stuff I was out there. They had me, right? And so when he told me that, I went back to my lawyer and was like, all right, I'll just take the plea. I ain't doing 35 years. What the plea again? Because I'm done. So he was telling me that I could potentially get, a few years. I'm like, all right, we do that. I'm not doing 35, right? So I ended up getting maybe 3 years of probation. But what I also got was a Class X felony. And that was an interesting ride for me. So doing all this, fast forward a little bit to getting back in the church. I remember sitting in my apartment one day, this is before I got married. And it was like a lot happened in a couple of years, man. Just took me down this bad place. And I was sitting in my apartment one day and the Lord just started dealing with me. And I said, I'm gonna go back to church. So I went back, I went to this church and I'm sitting in the back of the room. And then all of a sudden I started getting a little more interested in the sermon. Then I went back to church with my dad, and he was in the church and I got the bug again. The bug bit me where I wanted to go out and be in community. And I understood church administration. God gifted me with that ability to help churches set up things, make sure their paperwork is straight. And it's something I came in to and love how to get it done, but I enjoy doing it. So, but I still wasn't saved that I go back and look at it. So one day we was at a revival and people were going around the room. They're like, everybody go around the room and, and call on the Lord. And I'm like, okay, here we go. Right, here we go. And I'm like, I ain't got time for all this. I'm like, I came to this revival against my will. And they was laying hands on people falling out on the floor and crying and all this. And all I kept thinking was while I was trotting around this room, this preacher better not touch me. That's all I kept thinking. He better not put his hands on me with this phony stuff. I ain't got time for this, right? Man, I turned the
Oh
corner.
man.
The preacher reached for me, never touched me. And I just
Mm.
like leveled out, hit the floor.
Slain in the spirit, huh?
Man, the literal example of being slain in the spirit. And I laid in that floor. The revival was over. And I cried probably, man, a couple of hours. But I didn't get up out the floor for at least an hour or so after the revival. And my
Mm.
mother was sitting over me. And people was trying to come to church. She just kept saying, leave me alone. Now, my mother's not that spiritual, been in church all her life, but at that moment, she understood, leave me alone. God was purging me.
Wow.
And while I was crying on the floor, man, I promise you that carpet was wet when I got up.
Mm.
Now, here's the interesting part. I walked away knowing I was saved, but I still was resisting.
Mm.
I was still resisting, man. God had to strip me down to nothing. And when he did that, he got my full attention. And after all of that drama and all that, I know God said, this is why I say, you can be saved and still go and do things that you don't have any business doing. And some people say, well, you're not saved. But God saved me. It was my choice to go back and do some of those terrible things and still be messed up in that stuff. But I knew exactly who he was and who he was in my life at that moment. And that's when the Lord started being real audible to me and started telling me things. And I still was kind of being hard-headed. So I got in the church and was a part of that whole, I'm gonna do right, Lord, because I'm tired now. You took everything from me. And I started going up on Chicago Avenue in Cicero, which is not being from the West Side. And I would stand on that corner and witness by myself.
Wow. By yourself.
By myself.
Wow.
And there was a little church down the street that I built a relationship with. I would go in the corner, I would witness, and I would bring all the guys back and give them soup and sort clothes out for them. Every weekend, without fail, I would go on that corner and witness.
Man, I probably rode past that corner with my dad because my dad was on Huron. What year was this, if you recall?
I want to say it couldn't have been 2000 yet, somewhere between 97 and 99.
Yeah, I was definitely on the weekends riding past that joint with my dad. That is crazy.
Man.
I ran across each other a few times.
Yeah.
Chicago Avenue, for those of you listening, that's not a small corner. And it's not the best of corner to be on, especially trying to witness and evangelize and tell people about Jesus. People, they keeping it moving over there. So you got to be, you got to definitely be filled up before you go over there and hit them corners. Something that you had said that I wanted to touch on with the being still being like hard-headed or resisting. Right. It makes me think about like Moses and how Moses was saved, right? He had led the children of Israel and he was doing this thing and raising up leaders and all that stuff. But it was something that happened that kept him out of the promised land, right? Like God told him to do something a certain way and he did it, but he didn't do it in complete obedience. God told him to speak to the rock. He struck it, being frustrated with people and not fully dealing with his anger, right? Letting it consume him, that kept him out the promised land. And a lot of those things, like he still was saved, like he's still in heaven, but it kept him from a promise that God had for him. And a lot of us, we do that. Like our salvation ain't taken from us, right? We still go to heaven. We still love Jesus, but giving into our sin, it keeps us from certain blessings on this side of eternity that God won't release to us. And I've definitely been there, just with bad money management and just kind of just doing things, being quick with it. And it's like, I didn't pray. I didn't seek out no wise counsel. God was like, that is not what I wanted you to do. And it kept me from a lot of doors being open to me. So it's just a good life lesson. With that being said, what is What has been like the biggest lesson or one of the biggest lessons that you've learned going through this sanctification process so far, from
Yeah.
childhood even up to now as being a pastor of a church?
Yeah. I just like from a church standpoint, if I can start there, I went to churches that God didn't send me to
Mm,
based on my resistance. I still was, had the wandering eye. You want to put it like that? Always been interested in women, man. That's how he got me out here and got me straight. He said, I'm gonna use what I know he gonna follow. And now I don't want nobody but her, right? Thank God for that. That's a blessing.
amen.
But man, I learned what not to do. When I was in those churches that God didn't send me to, and I realized it, then God wouldn't allow me to go. And I learned how not to treat people as a pastor before I was a pastor. I learned how bad pastoring looks.
Mm,
I learned what church hurt looks like. I had to absorb all of that stuff,
yeah.
all that pain. Even going back to my childhood, witnessing, a lot of demonic stuff, just being in the streets, on the streets, and seeing domestic violence at its finest. It seemed like
Mm,
I was stepped out of heaven into hell because of the way I lived my life.
wow.
And I always kind of put an analogy of from the playground to the pulpit.
Mm,
I played a lot, I've done a lot of stuff at a young age, exposed to things at 10, 11 years old. If I graduated from high school at 16, do realize that I was on my way to high school when I was 11, 12.
mm,
So that's a baby by most
yeah.
rights, you know. So I learned, man, so much about what not to do. That was the common thread and all of that. All my own experiences, all of the harsh things that I had to endure, it was God purging me, right? And,
Mm,
and getting me straight for a time such as this. I didn't know that then, but I had that Christ foundation. I think that kept me from going too far, right? I
yeah.
went far. I did a lot of crazy stuff, and I went out there pretty deep, right?
Yeah.
Had to, get my head slapped around a couple of times, but it's just with that common thread of you're gonna learn what not to do. You're gonna love
Mm,
people and treat people right, and I had a quick temper when I was back in the world, real nasty temper, and God dealt with me in that, So during all those times, honestly, Derry, it just came to a point of me really going back to my roots of what is love.
mm,
And that stayed with me through all of that. I remember one time just getting real uneasy, and I was taking probably a real risk with moving some drugs. And I had a lot of stuff on me. And I remember saying to myself, Lord, please let me. And then when I almost got it out of my mouth, it was like, I'm such a disappointment. I'm laughing now, man, but I was doing some dumb stuff. And when I had a fire, house fire, you know, I wasn't saved. I was out the streets, and the Lord burnt the whole house down. And that was an example of how the Lord was just pulling on me, pulling on me,
mm,
pulling on me. And I finally became more obedient. But when I got to the church and started going to churches that I shouldn't have been in, and I did that twice. I did
yeah.
that twice. And I had to pray and ask God to release me. And when he finally did release me, I remember a song by Daryl Cooley, He's Preparing Me. I
Mm,
played that song every Sunday before anybody came to church. I was a deacon at the church, and I would play that song over the PA system. I would blast it out, loud as almost it can go. And that's all I kept hearing in that lyric. He's preparing me. And when God finally released me, I said, man, I'll never turn back. But watch this. I still was disobedient because I should have been pastor. I've been in the same church I've been in now almost as long as I've been married, right? My wife and I went to this church. My mentor, I ran into him years, ago. He's dead and gone now, be with the Lord. But I was still being somewhat disobedient because they asked me to pastor when he passed, like 11, maybe 15 years ago. And I was like, nah, I ain't nobody's pastor. I'll mess with the youth. I'll be the youth leader. I'll do that. And then here it is, these years later, same church. Now I'm pastoring the church after all that, pain, watching people leave, people getting church hurt. And I was just sitting in a meeting one day, and my wife made a statement. And it was 2 times in my life she made some statements that blew my head off. She said, we didn't open a church, so we don't have a right to close it. Because that was the solution that one of the pastors wanted to do, want to close the church.
Wow.
And because it was down to nobody. And I said, nah. She said that we're going to keep it. The other time she said something when I left corporate America, I was sitting on the front porch. I said, well, you know what this means? You know, life is going to change. She's like, well, if you don't do it, we're not going to make it anyway.
Woo!
I said, whoa, I wasn't expecting that.
That's the word right there. Get that on a shirt or something, boy.
I said, okay. And it wasn't that I was expecting her to say something worldly or like, man, I still want to get my deal. We was all right. You know, God had blessed us. I've been in sales, you know, all those years, and we had done well, you know, traveled well. But when she said that, it was like, oh, and this was before I started pastoring. So when she said that in the church meeting, you know, I was listening, right?
Yeah.
It's time. So, man, that's when, you know, I started pastoring, brother, about 6 years ago now. But been in the church on the west side in the Austin community over 20.
Wow. Yeah. So as I said, when we first started this, like I wanted to have you on here because like I said, when my first interaction with you, I was like just blown away. I had never seen a pastor like be in a community like that, like getting his hands and feet dirty, like leading out these things that you were doing. And then to see you at like La Frolic, and I was like, he there every time? Like it was like that just once, like that, not just at the first one, but like every week you there. I was like wow. So I'm sitting back, and then you know, I'm looking and I'm observing and I'm talking to other pastors in the same time frame of all that. We're trying to like reach out to pastors and connect with them. I'm doing my own journey, like through my church, not just for the organization I work for, but this is like my own personal thing. And I'm like trying to get pastors to like link up to do outreach. How can we serve the community? How can whatever resources you got, we gonna add our resources to that and let's serve the people, right? This is opportunity for us to come together collectively and not just give out like food and clothes and all that stuff, but share the gospel, right? Like people will be more likely to listen to you when they get something, right? And so I'm like, how can we do that? And it was just like all these doors was being closed in my face. I'm like, what's going on? I was like real discouraged. And then to see you like out there faithfully. And I'm like, okay. Then I found out you were leading like the 25th district. And I was like, what? So I was just like blown away that this pastor, and it's not like you got like this big old mega church, right? Like it ain't like TD Jake status, nothing like that. But it's like, man, this church in the community and this pastor is doing all these things, serving all these people, blessing all these lives, using the resources that he has to give. And I was really like, my heart when me and my coworker came to your church and was helping with the food drive that day, I was just like, man, like this is amazing. Like sometimes we get so captivated by like the big stuff, like the big church is doing this, they giving away food or how much food they giving away. But it's like, man, we up in here, it was a few of us, we dropping food in bags, we setting them up, and it just brought so much joy. And I was like, man, how can we get more, or why isn't more churches and pastors doing this type of stuff? And I want to ask you, like, how important is it for pastors to be aware of what's going on in the community and to be involved in that?
Yeah. Well, first let me say, man, I'm completely humbled, you know, by your statements. I'm telling you, it just brings so much peace to me to know that God said he'll always fight my battles and you know, clear my good name. Right. And I know that I don't deserve any of this. Saved by grace, lest any man boast. I don't deserve this, right? But I also tried to pattern my life after Christ and do like he did, ministry like he did. That's why I'm motivated to do it like I do it. Yeah. So why is it so important for pastors to be in community? I look at, you know, the city dynamics. And when you think about pastors, they're kind of the stand-all or the withstand the test of time, right? People come and go, politicians, if you will, come and go, companies come and go, but it seems like the church is always there. People say it's church on every corner. I said, that might be God's plan. There's enough people to go around. I said, don't fight the church on that one. I said, that one, leave that one alone. But I just say like the church is the most stable thing, right? You always can find a church. But if a community, if you as a pastor leave a community and the community don't know you gone or don't miss you, you haven't done your job.
Wow.
And you don't have to be dead.
You gotta say that one again. You gotta say that one again.
If you leave the community and the community don't know you're gone, you haven't done your job. You've just been, hustling the gospel, I will, if I can say it that way.
Wow.
And I consider, we're in spiritual warfare, right? So I consider us like the Green Berets of ministry, right? We go places that others won't go.
Others won't, right?
We do things that others won't do. We have that intense, different type of training, right? We have that 12 disciple type training, that grit. So I can walk up in alleys on some of the toughest parts of the city. I can go on Lake and Central for those that might be listening and know what that corner looks like. That's not an easy corner to be on, but I've been all up in those alleys and all that around there, and they all know me. I could probably go around there in the middle of the night and probably be safer there than I would be in other places, And I think we as leaders, pastors, and community, and having our fingers on the pulse of the community are the ones that we have to be the trusted resource. And we have to put ourselves in a position, whether the people want it or not at the moment, you have to be ready and keep your divine appointments, right? So when the time does come and God provides you with what somebody else needs, you have to have that divine appointment. You have to be where he wants you to be, when he wants you to be, how he wants you to be. So I don't get to pick and choose when and where. I just do it, man. And that's important. Community need leadership that's been there and will continue to be there. And I know this may ruffle some feathers. I don't believe in retiring, right? I say if I'm in a wheelchair on my back, let me get that last sermon in, but I am equipping, preparing the next generation.
Right.
I'm raising them up and giving them opportunities to speak and teaching and training, but this is a lifetime assignment.
Yeah. I know verses on retiring in the Bible.
I haven't found it.
I ain't seen them neither. So, what is the primary role of a pastor and like the role of the church in the community for because not everybody listening to this is a believer or anything like that, and so we can clarify like what is the role of a pastor, and then what is the role of the church in the community?
Yeah. You've heard this cliche, and this might be the easiest way to present it. The church is a hospital, right, full of sick folks. And people think the church is a good place, best place. You come there and there's not any mess and everybody's, loving on. No, it's not true. So that's the first thing I want the viewers to know. The church is a group of people that have invited a group of people that got some stuff going on, right? Yeah. But the church is a safe place. Not judgment free, because the church tells us to judge, right? And the gospel is the one that does it. Gospel does that, right?
Yeah.
So you can't say the preacher talking about me. I'm preaching the word, and that word is purging you. And
we call to expose the deeds of darkness.
Yes.
So if it's some evil up in here and some evil deeds, then we got to expose it. We got to talk about it. We got to deal with it.
Yeah. But the church is really, man, there to help people grow. It's that extended family. It's that extension from your household where you were a toddler and you felt completely safe somewhere. And although you made a lot of mistakes and sometimes you didn't want to, be there. I want to be on my own. It's like, the prodigal son, give me my inheritance, and then you got to come back. The church is there for that, to return and to give and to embrace people and love on people. And the pastor is exactly how I believe Christ exemplified it when he talked about the good shepherd. And, basically you talk about the one who would give his life for a sheep almost, right? Where you would lay at the door, right? And that protector. I oftentimes talk about marriage and I say, I fiercely protect my wife. I fiercely protect her, and I do the same thing with the church. I fiercely protect the church, the legacy of the church and who Christ is. If what you believe, if what I believe offends you, is something wrong with what you believe. I'm going to stand on what I believe. And the church has to stand for what Christ represents. And the pastor has to be just what John was. John was the forerunner of Christ. And John basically pointed people to Christ. He didn't try to take any of it on himself or for his own or lead. And he had many of people following him.
Yeah.
And we as pastors have to be careful not to let people follow us. You don't go to Pastor Mac Church, you go to Mount Olivet. And I teach that. And the pastor's role is to teach the Bible in a way that people know how to navigate life.
Yeah.
So even if you're not a believer, there's something in the Bible that can help you navigate life, help you deal with, mental health, help you deal with how to, conduct yourself in awkward settings. And when people misuse you and despitefully use you, right, abuse you, how to reconcile. So that's what pastors are. We're the great conductors, but no conductor can conduct that orchestra if he don't understand every instrument. So you have to personally get to know every individual there to do it effectively.
Amen. I appreciate pastors so much when they take time to fellowship. They just don't like slide out the back door that's part of the stage. But like they in their sermon, but then they're there like mingling with the crowd, and it's real fellowship. And you can shake their hand, you can ask them questions. Like I really just appreciate those pastors. I call them other pastors that do that sneak out the back door, like them the motivational speakers. They just came, got they check and dipped out. But we really want real engagement and to equip the next generation. Like we got to be on the front lines, right? And not just pastors, right? But everybody who claims to be a believer in Jesus, you have a responsibility. You have a work to do. It's not just for the pastors and the missionaries and those type of people with those type of gifts to do stuff, but all of us are called to go out and be able and make ourselves available to preach the gospel, not just like I'm gonna just let pastor do it. Like, nah, that's what burnout happens. And then we see so many pastors, they just want to give up, and they have given up because there's so much on them. And then they try to be like superhuman for all these people. And it's like, no, man, we need to. It's a word that I learned 4 years ago, almost 4 years ago. It's called delegate. Like in the church, it's delegate. Like, I'm going to do it with you. But once you learn this, I take it and run. And then you give it to the next person. And just as freely as I got it, as freely as I'm going to give it to you, and you give it to the next person, and we continue to go, and we continue to multiply that way. And so learning to delegate responsibilities and different things has been a real blessing. And so, I got couple more little things, and then I'm gonna let you get up out of here. How important is it for pastors to be involved in politics? Like we live in this where everything now is political, like even topics in sports. You can't just watch an NBA game no more. There's some political going on in the background. Football, same thing, right? Kneel or not to kneel, all these type of things. And now that same thing is going into the church where you got to choose a side. You liberal, you conservative, you Republican, you Democrat. How important is it for pastors to be involved in it? Should they be involved with it? What does that look like?
Yeah, there's a lot of things I can say on this topic. I will refer back to Romans 13 chapter and how Christ taught us about our role in government and how we should embrace, right? The word of God gives us, and of course, Paul was doing the teaching there, but we ought to be a part of all of these things that's going on. Going back to my earlier statement about the church being the staple of the community and having its finger on the pulse of the people, people need to have a go-in-between, even when you're dealing with, say, a political or elected official. Some of the work that I do in the community now, I'm a convener in the Austin community. And in that room, at those tables, you have elected officials, you have CPD, you have resource organizations, you have residents. Whoever lives in the community have a responsibility to the community. So as the pastor or as a pastor, and in many instances, I'm leading those people and I don't even know that I'm their leader. They'll tell me on the other side, I lead people that will never come to Mount Olivet. They'll never enter that building, but I lead them. And they will come to me and want to pray or want some leadership or some guidance. So we as pastors have to have involvement with all of that, because everyone who lives in the community or serve a community or elected to do work in the community, whatever that is, has a responsibility to the community, and they have to be accountable to the community. So those things have their rightful place, right? But here's the flip side of that. When it comes to me now being disobedient to Christ, then I'm not going to do that. That's not going to happen. We know that there were some disciples that they would say, hey, we told y'all not to speak of the Lord. And if you do, this is what we was going to do to you. And they was like, man, do what you got to do, right? If I could just be gritty, well, do what you got to do. But I'm going to say what I got to say to represent the Lord. Scripture tells us, as for me and my house, we're going to serve the Lord. So I'll never put myself in a position where my walk with Christ will be compromised in order to fit into a governmental structure. We can all play in the sandbox together, but if I have to denounce Christ, then I'm gonna say, God, you gotta take the handcuffs off me now. It's about to be a war, And I think that's what we have to remember. And I think if we don't have to go in with our gloves on, and I'm saying that kind of tongue in cheek, taking the handcuffs off, ready to fight and all that. No, we have to navigate those things, because we sometimes are the neutral space and all of that, and we're the trusted resource. But we have to be willing and ready to let people know who I answer for, who I answer to. I'm a follower of Jesus Christ. I am not ashamed of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And that's going to be in contention with some of the, politics and some of the laws of the land. But as long as I'm not going against the Lord, as the Bible has taught me, as Romans 13 clearly has stated, and other places in the Bible, you have to involve everybody, because there are different resources that people need that they have to get to that they'll never get to if the pastor wasn't involved.
Yeah. And sometimes too, I think people forget like that God is sovereign. So if these people are in positions of a power, like God allowed it to happen, right? When people were running around, just this past election, the president and people were like, I can't believe they stole the election. I was like, look, man, like God was in control. Like God knew who he was going to allow to be in that seat, right? And so we just got to continue to do what we supposed to do. I believe that we're in a season like God is overthrowing some of these tables in America. Like Jesus flipped tables in the temple. I believe that God is doing that in America, where he's turning over tables and exposing. I believe that we're in a time where God is exposing all these things that we held on to, all these idols, all these people, people was out there with banners. This person is God's man and all this other stuff. And it was like, look, man, like God allowed him to get in there for a reason, right? And it's your responsibility to seek him out and see what that reason is. But we don't supposed to be putting our trust and hope into this president, right? God has the final word. He's sovereign. He's in control. Continue to stay on course with where he has you going in your life, and he's going to work out everything in the end. My last question for you.
One more thing. You mind if I say one more thing? Before
Go ahead.
I recall the Buffalo Bills player, and I just can't call his name right now, the young man that had the heart attack on the field. Right. Yeah. And that next Sunday, or that Sunday after that incident, I think that was Thursday Night Football, maybe. And on that Sunday,
that was Thursday.
I preached a sermon, and the Lord, calls me to put that part in there. Actually, he changed my sermon on to every knee must bow, right? Every knee must bow, every tongue, shall confess, that Jesus Christ is Lord. And when I looked at that, I remember there was a time, and you said it earlier, where if you kneel, on football, we know there was football players, everybody was getting in trouble. I said, but what happened that day? Everybody was on the knee.
Everybody was kneeling. People were
that
praying.
Was God showing his sovereignty all over again, right? And it was like everybody want to say what they don't want to. Even people who didn't believe was praying. Let's think about it. People who didn't know God got to know God. People who knew God got to know him better. And I was just watching this thing unfold, man, and my heart was just filled with joy, because I was just excited to see that the world was seeing that God was still in control, that he stopped time, got everybody on one accord. And even though people going to get up and go their own ways and all that, But everybody came together. They said something about it was $7,000 or something in this fund that he was doing for charity, and it became millions kind of like overnight. God will take the wealth of the wicked and lay it up for the righteous. I was just, man, I'm telling you, I was seeing so much Christ over that situation. And I just got so excited about that. And I was just like, yeah, God, you showing us that that day is going to come. And you might want to choose now whom you're going to serve.
Mm, mm. I love that. I love that. Yeah, I didn't even know he had a fund that he was that the fundraiser that he was doing. But yeah, I mean, God is in control. He is in control. My last question for you. Now, being like a pastor that is so involved in the community, how important do you believe, or how important is it, in your opinion, for a pastor to either live in his community or live close to his community, to be involved in the community?
Yeah, that's a heavy, hot topic right now, because people feel like if you don't live in the community, you shouldn't serve in that community, or if you live close to it, it qualifies you. Only thing I can say to that, honestly, is whom he calls, he equips, right? And I know when Jesus sent the disciples out, he sent them out 2 by 2, and he sent them all over, right?
Right.
All these different places they went. And Jesus also expressed that, a prophet wouldn't be accepted in his own home. You can be from a community and people won't receive you. My thought on that is go where you're called and where God sent you. Because if he sent you there, he's going to make a way for you there. Now, we have a thing where people who are from a community or not from the community, and when people find out, they say, oh, they shouldn't be here. It's like, you don't know why God sent them there.
Right.
I don't know if I agree with that wholeheartedly, because I just don't see the biblical example of that. I've seen Paul go on several missionary journeys.
Yeah.
Right. I saw Christ walk miles and miles to minister. He said, go into the highways and hedges and compel men to come. So I don't know what the relevance is of that. I know it's a worldly thought that's trying to imply something that says that a community if you're from a community. Well, I was raised and grew up first 17 years of my life in Auburn, Gresham, and Inglewood.
Yeah.
But then the rest of my life, I've been in Austin, lived, owned, and everything else. I had no desire to go in Austin. None. No desire to go on the west side of Chicago. None. And I'll give you an example. One time and I don't even know why this person said it. I was in a community meeting. And, at this point, I've been in service to the community 25 plus years. I didn't live on Chicago Avenue and Drake. You don't know where that's at, then you gotta get right. I done lived on North Avenue and Cicero. I done lived in some tough spaces, Yeah. And the man said, you're not even from Austin, you do all this work. I don't know why he said that, but he made he did something to the room when he said it. But before I can even open my mouth, God just used somebody else to say, well, man, where your heart is, where your treasure is also. And it was like, okay, what's going on here? I don't know what your point is for saying that, but when people start to bring up that, to me, they're trying to validate or not validate someone. And I don't think anybody should stand for that, to be honest with you. Now, I do have a challenge with people who, come into a community, don't give anything to that community, take from that community and go up somewhere and live somewhere else. I do have a challenge with that. I think that's wrong. God will deal with that.
Yeah.
So
yeah. I have just sharing a personal experience or a thought that I have is it's real hard for me to thinking about being a pastor of a church, and then not saying that you need to be from the community or that you even need to live in that community, but how hard is it going to be for you to serve that community if you live X amount of miles, 40, 50 miles away? right?
Oh,
Like, and you're not in full-time ministry. I mean, like you're in full-time ministry, but like you also work a job. So it's not like you're here every day. Like you got the office set up in the church and you're involved in community meetings and things like that. How much can you engage in the community if you don't live in the community and then you also have a full-time job and you live far away? You know what I'm saying? Like that's something that I wrestle with.
And you know what, I agree with you in that sense, because to me, I would question the call on that. You know, maybe 20 years ago or some other time ago, there was a time in the season for certain things. The time in the season now, you have to have, we've been talking about it all night, right? You have to have your finger on the pulse of the community. When I'm walking down North Avenue in Central, people know who I am. When I'm on Lake in, Central, they know who I am. When I'm on Chicago Avenue, when I'm at La Follette Park and Little Jack Park, everywhere I'm going, I know people, right? And that's because I've embedded myself in the community. And I do struggle with that fact of who's the pastor of the church, can't never get them to a meeting, can't get their church involved in that. And a lot of that is because they are the pastor of that building and not a follower of Jesus Christ. A follower of Jesus Christ, to me, that call, wherever you've been called to minister or pastor, whatever, you are planted in that community.
Yeah. And
you have to live, breathe, and eat the community and love that community. And that means you got to spend time with it, right? You can't
spend time. Man, can't just come on a Sunday and then just be like, I'm gonna go do this event and think that people are going to be like, oh, okay, you might get one or two that's like, oh, he cool, he can speak real good or whatever. But it's like, who is this guy? Like, where he from? Or he got a church in the community? I ain't never seen him before. How long they been there? 5 years. What? Like, I ain't never seen him nowhere.
Yeah.
But I wrestle with that. Just being honest.
You know what? I would encourage you to pray about it. And like I said, I'm in agreement with you that if you're not planted, anything that's planted somewhere, fresh flowers can be cut and they go somewhere, but if they cut from the root, they're gonna die, right? You can't be taken up and replanted somewhere else. But wherever you are serving means you are there. You are fully invested in that community. And for some that means living there also, right? That could be it. But there should never be a time of, because you got some that can live there and you don't know where they church at or who they are or where they come from. I mean,
that's true.
I'll be hard on the church. I'll be the first to be hard on the church and say, man, your church is across the street. Why we not on North Avenue and Central together passing out coats?
Right.
Why is that? But you have to be invested, man, and you have to be so intentional about loving and serving people. And you're right, you can't do that, if you living 30 miles away, working, all week long, you only showing up on Sundays. That means that you're just, maybe going back to one of your statements, you're the motivational speaker for the people who show up in the building.
Yeah.
That's why I say I passed a lot of people that have never come in Mount Olivet. I'll give you a quick example of that. In La Follette Park, a lady walked up to me after hearing me week after week after week, loving on people and all this. She walked up to me and said, my mom wasn't in church and I'm not really in church, but I'll be honored if you would do my mother's funeral.
Wow.
I was like, okay. She's like, well, what you charge? I'm like, less. I know my business mind is going to say one thing because it's, it's time and effort and all that. But this may be an opportunity for you to trust God on how to give. Now that gets you in trouble. I mean, I'd have been places, man, I didn't even get lunch money, right? And it's 500 people in the room. And I'd have been places where 50 people in the room and mortgage got paid. Just being honest. But you don't worry about that. You don't do it for that. And that's the reason why when you're embedded in a community and you loving on people and you're right there where they are struggling with them and crying with them and helping. When I get to the funeral, half of the Follette Park was in the funeral because all them sisters and cousins and kids, the little kids like, I know you Pastor Mac, you be giving us all this stuff in the community. Man, but that's what loving on your community is all about.
Amen. I want to let you have the final word. I want you to just share your heart, however you're feeling. whatever word you're that you're thinking about right now, anything that's on your heart, I'm gonna let you end us out. Just share your heart with the people. I appreciate you coming on here and just giving your time and energy, being able to talk to little old me. But man, it's been such a blessing. It's always a blessing whenever I get a chance to talk to you and just be around you, just soak up so much game, as they say. Like, you're just a man of wisdom. And so I want to allow you just to take us out with just sharing your heart.
Well, first of all, let me say thank you for the opportunity. I'm humbled. These platforms, I think, are so powerful. So I commend you for what you're doing. You know, some people only got 5 minutes in them. They can look at it and be turning it off 7 minutes later. You know, we was always taught, don't leave before the benediction. And I guess that's what this is, right? So hopefully people will feel value in watching your whole podcast, not just because I'm on it, right? But the whole segment. Some are longer, some are shorter, probably. I would be willing to bet. But when I think about everything that God has me doing today and how I got here and where else he wants me to go, the word, my favorite scripture is Isaiah 40:31. Now, I love the whole word of God, right? Don't get me wrong. But Isaiah 40:31 have taken me through some, tough times and some amazing times. It said, and I'm only going to give you part A of it. It said, they that wait upon the Lord, he shall renew their strength. Yeah. And I look at the word wait, and a lot of people are not patient. They don't wait on their gift. They don't wait on their blessing. They don't wait on ministry. Everyone's in a rush. Everyone is in a rush. Give you an example. I was sitting on a tarmac of an airport. I just came back from preaching somewhere, and we sitting there, and 2-hour delay. They wouldn't let anybody off the plane. They said, if you get off the plane, you stuck where you are. If you stay on the plane and you got a connector, we'll pay for you at your connecting spot because you won't be able to fly to the next day. And I was talking to my wife, and I looked at her and I said, sometimes delay can avoid disasters, right? And some people say delay, don't mean deny. So a delay can avoid disasters sometimes. And I said this to the stewardess. I went to the restroom 2 hours. I went to the restroom like 5 times at this point, drinking water and all that. And she said, do you want to say that over the intercom? I said, no, I'm okay. I don't need to do that. I'm all right. But what happened was the plane computer system went down. So it would have worked, but whoever guides the plane in wouldn't have known the plane was there. So waiting requires patience, but don't let your wait become weight, WEIGHT. In other words, don't let burden bend you over and weigh you down when you're waiting on the Lord, because the Bible specifically said, they that wait on the Lord, first of all, question who you're waiting on and what you're waiting for. And if it's the Lord, then what is his promise? He shall renew your strength. So everything that you thought was not there when you thought it should be, or the challenges that you have and the circumstances that may seem challenging, just remember that scripture and what context of it is. And that's what I would say to anybody that might view this, listen to this, or talk about what's going on in the world today. You have to learn how to wait on the Lord. And when you do that, he's going to renew you. You're going to always tease the kids and say, I'm Batman. They be like, why you say you Batman? I said, because Batman was regular. He just used the resources. He didn't have superhuman strength.
Right.
He's a normal dude with a lot of resources, right? And I said, that's who I am, a normal dude that intentionally and figured out all these resources. Now I'm the spoon in this pot, Gary, and I'm stirring and serving, man. And I'm going to do that till the Lord call me home.
Amen. Amen. Pastor Mac, thank you so much for just joining me and coming on this platform and being part of this discussion. And I really appreciate you. I love your heart for the Lord, and I love your heart for community. And I just pray that you would receive all of the things that the Lord has for you to come, man. And so thank you again. Appreciate you joining me. If you guys watching this have just enjoyed this conversation, won't you hit that like button? And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. It helps us out a bunch. All right. And until the next time, my name is Dorin. This is Pastor Mac. Thank you for joining us on The Weird Perspective. Until the next one, we out of here. God bless y'all.
Be encouraged. Be encouraged.